For most of the 20th century, Boeing was untouchable, the most admired manufacturer in America, the company that put a man on the moon's rocket boosters, that built the plane that every other plane wanted to be, that made the United States the undisputed leader of global aviation. Then, something changed. Not suddenly, not with a single scandal or a single bad decision, but slowly, quietly, over years of choices made in boardrooms and budget meetings. The company that once defined American engineering excellence began to come apart at the seams. Today, Boeing is facing its deepest crisis in a century. Production delays worth billions, a workforce shaken by layoffs and strikes, suppliers pushing back, airlines canceling orders, and a reputation that took 100 years to build, now seriously damaged. How does a company like Boeing get here? What's really going on inside? And what does it mean for the future of air travel? That's what we're going to find out. To understand how far Boeing has fallen, you have to understand how high it once stood. Founded in 1916 on the shores of Lake Union in Seattle, Boeing didn't just build planes. It built the architecture of the modern world. The 747, the jumbo jet, didn't just change aviation. It democratized it. Before the 747, transatlantic flight was a luxury for the wealthy. After it, ordinary families could cross the Atlantic for the first time. Boeing made the planet smaller. At its peak, Boeing's factory in Everett, Washington, the largest building by volume on Earth, was a cathedral of engineering. The culture inside was obsessive about precision, about craftsmanship, about doing things right even when it was slow, even when it was expensive. Engineers there didn't just have jobs. They had a mission. That culture became Boeing's greatest competitive advantage, and it would become the first thing the new leadership dismantled. The turning point that most analysts trace back to, the moment Boeing's DNA began to change, was 1997. That year, Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas, a struggling aerospace rival. Boeing kept the name, Boeing kept the headquarters for a while. But McDonnell Douglas, many insiders argue, won the culture war. The executives who came in from McDonnell Douglas spoke a different language. Not aerodynamics, not safety margins, not engineering tolerances measured to 1/1000th of an inch. They spoke the language of Wall Street, quarterly earnings, share buybacks, cost reduction targets, return on invested capital. For a company that had always been run by engineers, it was a tectonic shift. And then in 2001, Boeing made a move that said everything. It relocated its corporate headquarters from Seattle, where the planes are actually built, to Chicago, 2,000 miles from the factory floor, 2,000 miles from the engineers. Former Boeing veterans described it as the moment the company stopped being an aerospace company that happened to be publicly traded and became a publicly traded company that happened to make aerospace products. That distinction sounds subtle. It isn't. Through the 2000s and into the 2010s, Boeing stock became a Wall Street darling. The share price climbed and climbed and climbed. Between 2013 and 2019, Boeing spent over $43 billion buying back its own stock, returning cash to shareholders instead of reinvesting it in factories, engineers, and research. From a pure financial engineering perspective, it worked brilliantly. Executives hit their targets, bonuses were paid, the stock kept rising. Boeing looked, on paper, like one of the best-run companies in America. But underneath the surface, the foundations were quietly rotting. Production was being pushed faster. Supplier contracts were being squeezed tighter. Quality control departments that used to have authority found their budgets cut and their warnings ignored. Engineers who raised concerns internally described being sidelined, reassigned, or simply not heard. The pressure from the top was clear. Deliver on time, deliver on budget, and don't let engineering perfectionism get in the way of the schedule. Nothing illustrates Boeing's transformation more clearly than the story of the 737 MAX, not as a safety story, but as a business story. By 2011, Boeing's main rival Airbus had launched the A320neo, a redesigned, fuel-efficient aircraft that was winning orders from airlines at an alarming rate. Boeing was losing ground fast, and its biggest customers were threatening to switch. Boeing faced a fundamental choice. Option 1. Design a completely new aircraft from scratch. The right engineering answer, but an enormously expensive and time-consuming one. Option 2. Update the existing 737 design, slap new engines on it, and get it to market fast. The financial logic of Option 2 was overwhelming. A brand new plane would take a decade and cost tens of billions. An updated 737 could be certified faster, cheaper, and, crucially, airlines that already operated 737s wouldn't need to retrain their pilots from scratch. So, Boeing chose speed over reinvention. The 737 MAX was born, not from an engineering vision, but from a competitive and financial calculation. That decision set off a chain of compromises, shortcuts, and internal pressures that would define Boeing's next decade. And the consequences are still playing out today. Fast forward to today, and Boeing is facing a production crisis unlike anything in its modern history. In January 2024, a door plug blew out of an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX mid-flight at 16,000 feet. No one was killed, but it exposed, in the most visceral possible way, the quality control problems that had been building inside Boeing's factories for years. The FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, responded by capping Boeing's 737 MAX production rate and launching an intensive audit of its manufacturing processes. What they found was deeply concerning. Dozens of instances of improper procedures, missing documentation, parts installed incorrectly. Boeing was ordered to fix its quality systems before it could increase production again. And the problems extended beyond Boeing's own factories. A significant portion of Boeing's fuselages are built by a supplier called Spirit Aerosystems in Wichita, Kansas. The relationship between Boeing and Spirit, a company that Boeing had actually spun off from itself in 2005 to cut costs, became a symbol of how outsourcing critical manufacturing had created new vulnerabilities. Boeing eventually moved to reacquire Spirit, acknowledging that the cost-cutting logic of the original spin-off had come at too high a price. The production problems aren't just about processes and parts. In the fall of 2024, Boeing's machinists, the skilled workers who actually build the planes, went on strike. 33,000 workers walked off the job in the largest Boeing labor action in decades. The strike lasted 7 weeks and cost Boeing an estimated $10 billion in lost production at the worst possible moment, when the company was already burning through cash, already behind on deliveries, already under regulatory scrutiny. The workers' grievances went beyond wages. Many described a factory culture where pressure to hit production targets had eroded the pride and the craftsmanship that used to define the job. Where shortcuts were normalized, where speaking up about quality concerns felt professionally risky. Boeing brought in a new CEO, Kelly Ortberg, in the middle of the crisis, tasked with rebuilding trust with workers, regulators, customers, and investors simultaneously. It is, by any measure, one of the hardest turnaround jobs in American corporate history. His message has been consistent. Boeing needs to return to its engineering roots, but saying it and doing it are very different things. Here's the financial reality Boeing is now living with. Since 2019, Boeing has lost over $25 billion, not in market cap, in actual cash losses. The company that was generating billions in profit every year is now burning through reserves at an alarming rate. Its debt load has ballooned to over $50 billion. Airlines that were waiting for new 737 MAX and 787 Dreamliner deliveries have been waiting years longer than contracted, forcing them to keep older, less fuel-efficient planes in service and disrupting their own expansion plans. Some airlines have quietly begun hedging their bets, ordering more Airbus aircraft, diversifying away from a supplier they can no longer fully rely on. And Airbus, Boeing's great rival, has never been stronger. The European manufacturer now holds the largest order backlog in commercial aviation history. For the first time in decades, the question of whether Airbus might permanently overtake Boeing as the world's dominant aircraft manufacturer is being asked seriously. It's not just the commercial side. Boeing's defense and space divisions, once reliable profit centers, have been hemorrhaging money too. The KC-46 tanker program, a contract to build refueling aircraft for the U.S. Air Force, has been plagued by delays and cost overruns that Boeing has had to absorb. The company has taken billions in charges on fixed-price defense contracts that were bid too aggressively. And then there is the Starliner, Boeing's crewed spacecraft built for NASA. In 2024, 2 NASA astronauts flew to the International Space Station aboard the Starliner. They were supposed to stay 8 days. They ended up stranded for 9 months because NASA determined the Starliner wasn't safe to bring them home. SpaceX ultimately had to rescue them. It was a humiliation that perfectly encapsulated Boeing's broader crisis. The company that once put humans on the path to the moon couldn't reliably operate a spacecraft in 2024, while a private startup founded in 2002 had to come to the rescue. Boeing's defense and space division has now reported losses for years running, a business that used to be the stable foundation of the company's finances. So, where does Boeing go from here? The new leadership has a plan: stabilize production, rebuild quality culture, renegotiate supplier relationships, restore trust with regulators and customers, reduce debt, and slowly, painfully, claw back the company's reputation, one delivered airplane at a time. It will take years. Some analysts believe Boeing can recover, that the underlying business, the order backlog, the engineering talent, and the brand still have enormous value. That this is a crisis of management and culture, not of the fundamental technology. Others are less sure. They point to a competitor in Airbus that has gained a structural lead, to a defense industry increasingly looking at new entrants, and to a workforce whose trust has been deeply damaged. Boeing's story isn't over, but it is, without question, at an inflection point. The decisions made in the next 3 to 5 years about culture, about investment, about what kind of company Boeing chooses to be, will determine whether this is the story of a great American institution that lost its way and found it again, or the story of how short-term thinking over decades can hollow out even the most extraordinary company ever built. If you found this valuable, subscribe. We cover the real stories behind the world's biggest companies. See you next time.